Some people have got the book already.
Yes.
So I think I'm on chapter 2 now. Or whatever it is, part 2 or something. So I continue with the this fourfold designation of the development of I, or self. Maybe for some people, they're able to observe the arising of I with the sense perceptions. You notice that? When there is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, especially obvious perhaps is thinking. If you observe the nature of some of your thoughts, you may notice how many thoughts are about yourself. Huh? Quite a few. maybe the vast majority. So maybe if you can imagine what your mind would be like if you didn't have all those thoughts about yourself, if you're truly selfless. Imagine the space you'd have in your mind. Imagine the peacefulness you'd have in your mind without thinking about yourself. Just a possibility. It does require some practice, mind you. So the third stage is actually one where the Buddha works the most, gives the most exercises. Identification. So when there's a sense of self arises, it's still a little bit nebulous, a little bit ephemeral. I see, I hear, I smell, I taste, I touch. In fact, if you look at that, if you go back just a little bit to noticing that process, you know, we usually say, the thought of I pops up immediately. You know, I see. But that's not right. You know, there is seeing. You know, there is the actual process is there is seeing happening, and then there is an interpretation in the mind, and then afterwards there is the thought arises, I am seeing. But actually it's I is seeing. Ear is hearing. Ear is hearing. That's the reality of it. And you say, you know, the ear is hearing. Oh, I hear. No, you don't. The ear hears, and then it's interpreted in the brain. Certain interpretations come in the brain, then reactions happen in the brain. So where is the I actually? Is the I in the ear? Is the I in the feeling and the perception? Is the I in the thinking about it? You know, where is that I actually? Of course, we would say all those things. Eh? Somebody's lazy and says, well, I guess I'm everything. Or all that's happening, going on, then it's so complicated, you just say, oh, I. The simplest word in the English language, I. You know, actually what's happening is, you know, hearing, then there is feeling, then there is perceiving of it, then there is thinking about it, analyzing it, judging it, blah, 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 blah. It's too complicated for most people, so this, oh, I am seeing. Lazy. But it's all a fantasy. It's not quite right, you see. And if you keep saying, I see, I hear, I smell, I taste, I touch, you begin to believe there is, you know, that kind of, that ghost basically begins to take shape. It's, oh, there must be somebody here then. But then if you inquire, what is that I? Some people ask the wrong question, say, who is that I? Well, asking the question, who is the I, already presupposes there is a who there. Yeah, there is an I there. But what is the I? What is I? What is self? Isn't that a little bit more doubt about it? What is the self? Well, is it my thoughts? Is it my feeling? There are two main sources of identification, the Buddha said. The first one is the senses. With the senses, you think, oh, there's seeing. Must be somebody who's seeing. Must be somebody who's hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Must be somebody there. Because it keeps popping up all the time. The second source of identification is what the Buddha called the 5 groups of grasping. A little bit more technical. I haven't got much time to go into it, and it's a little bit more formal. If you want to learn about it, I talked more about it in the session in Victoria, the people there. But anyway, basically there is, the Buddha breaks down what we call ourself to 5 basic functions. There is body, then there is feeling, then there is perception, or I say recognition, then there is what we call sankharas. Sankhara is a really difficult one because the most prominent function of sankhara, it's basically thinking processes. The most prominent one of them is will. It is the will which is dominant in directing things. There's many mental factors in that, in sankhara. And then there is, probably the most important one, is knowing or consciousness. And these are just life functions. Every human being, every brain, probably some of the animals also have at least some of these functions. They just happen. But we assume that it's I, it's me, it's a self. But in fact, there's just these functions going on. Unfortunately, they happen so quickly and automatically, most of it's hard to distinguish. Fortunately, the Buddha, with his profound meditation experience, could distinguish them. And maybe sometimes, if your mind calms down enough, you can begin to notice some of these particular ways, functions working in the mind. Like there is the knowing of something, observing a certain object, and then there is some kind of part of your mind begins to give some. It's like I can see it sometimes. It's just like putting on the search program. Google search. What is this? It's or more like no reply given or something. No. What does it say? No result given. Sometimes, when I was in Thailand, living in a foreign country, sometimes no result. What is it? I don't know. And then once he begins to distinguish something, then you notice beginning to analyze it or think about it. Oh, that's nice. That's not so nice. I wonder what it's made of. I wonder how much it costs. What does it weigh? Blah, 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 blah. For some people, they get spun off with all this, analyzing, interpreting, thinking about, and they forget that's only a perception. And maybe you got it all wrong. Maybe I got it upside down. Maybe this is the way it should go. So the Buddha pointed out there's 2 sources of identification. I mean, the second one, I would say, is a bit more complicated. There's body, the physical body, and it's actually, when the Buddha analyzes this again, there isn't the body here. There's actually 4 elemental qualities that are coming together and express themselves in this form, that's all. Earth, fire, water, air. 4 basic elemental qualities. We could say maybe, especially if you study chemistry, there is molecules and atoms here making up this body. We say my body, but we share the same molecules and atoms, don't we? These molecules are made up of carbon and oxygen and nitrogen, and where is the body besides chemicals? Because of chemical reactions, besides cells, for example. We all have cells, but my cells have a certain structure. But when you begin to investigate what's behind this, where is the body? And then you begin to recognize, perhaps, it's not so tangible. This body is elemental qualities coming together, and they're being transformed. Many of us, we have this image of a self, of a body, for example, and then we hold on to it. And when it starts to change, we suffer. I shouldn't get old. The body shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. I'm still investigating this myself, I still think I'm only 21, Except when I climb up to my hut up the hill, and then halfway up no, you're not 21 anymore, maybe you're 35. 2 more steps and then you're 50. Halfway up I gotta stop and rest. No, I feel 90. But the images many times don't add up, don't match the reality of it, do they? Yeah. We hold on to these concepts, these ideas and concepts. When you begin to observe the way things really are, with clarity, with calmness of mind. Calmness of mind, it calms down the preconceptions, calms down the interpretations, it calms down your expectations, so you can begin to see more clearly how things really are. And then of course, the second phase is developing the ability to be more aware of development of mindfulness. So in the meditation development, meditation practice, say bhavana in Buddhist teachings, Pali language, there's two kinds of meditation, basically. One is called calm meditation, one is called insight meditation. You know this, right? All familiar? Samatha, vipassana? Yeah, a few heads are nodding. Yeah. So calm meditation is usually what people understand as meditation the most. That is focusing your attention on the object, observing the breathing, the mind calms down, and for some people that's enough. That's the best they can do. Feeling very calm and blissful, and the sense of self can be attenuated because there's not so much self-referencing, right? If you look at your thoughts, most of your thoughts are about yourself. They are self-referencing all the time. They reinforce your sense of self. But when that self-referencing calms down, then the sense of the self gets a little bit attenuated and not so clear anymore. If I'm not this solid body, sometimes you're observing the breathing, and if your mind calms enough, or you get more focused on the breathing, there's just breathing here. It's not body breathing anymore. There just is breathing, just is breath flowing. Our usual beginning of perceptions are, I am breathing. You keep focusing on breathing, then it's okay, maybe I'm not breathing, because actually the body is breathing by itself. And unfortunately, the body will keep breathing when you aren't even there. Fortunately, because otherwise you die when you fall asleep, right? The breathing happens without you. Did you ever notice that? If you don't think about yourself, the breathing still happens. Fortunately, otherwise it would have passed away by now. So the more your mind gets calmer, your perceptions change from I am breathing to breathing. And after a while, it can just be a breathing process and nobody home. Some people mistake that for enlightenment. Just breathing is happening, nobody there, and it's so peaceful not to have to think about myself and all my problems usually. However, eventually you come out of it. Come back to seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and then triggered off automatically. I'm seeing this and that, and I like it, don't like it, and have to do this and have to do that. But if you see that process going on, you don't take it so seriously anymore. It's just a perception. Just a passing perception. And you also recognize that many times it's not even correct. Your perception is not even correct. Misperception, so much misperception. Like thinking that I am thinking. The reality is I'm not thinking. Thinking is happening, and then afterwards, there's thinking going on, and I guess I'm thinking. That's your thinking. Where's thinking coming from? In other words, thoughts think you. You don't think the thoughts think you. Very humbling, isn't it? And then be careful what thoughts you think, because otherwise the you is created accordingly, So if your thoughts are thinking unskillfully, you create an unskillful you. So the Buddha pointed out these two main areas of identification. The six senses, and for some people it's easier to see how that happens. Other times it's just so quick, so happens so quickly, hard to notice. Or there is the identification with these mental functions. And basically you can say there are some people, as personality, we have our own particular source of identification. Some people are very physical, sensual people, identifying more with the body. Others are more feeling people, identify with their feelings. Others with their memories, others with their thinking, others with the ability to know, or wisdom or something or other. but that all of us, at some time or other, identify with some of these particular functions in the mind. The Buddha gave certain meditations to use. Buddha gave 3 primary meditations, how to deal with identification happening, you say, most of the time unconsciously. The most common one the Buddha gave was reflections on impermanence, contemplating impermanence. This is usually the key element in what they call insight meditation. So in the exercises in developing mindfulness, which is the most prominent mental quality of developing insight meditation, insight is vipassana. Passana means to see, is to see very clearly. So one of the first exercise is to be aware of, be more clearly aware of bodily sensations. And there's various exercises in that. But once one is aware of bodily sensations, then most people they learn mindfulness kind of in a secular context, developing awareness, right? Mindfulness. But in the Buddhist teachings, the second stage is you develop awareness now of the arising and passing of what you observe. So, for example, you're aware of a particular sensation in the body. If I bring awareness to the sensations of the body right now, what's the most prominent sensation? It's actually not very prominent right now, but it's safe to talk about, is my sore knee. That's why I sit in a chair now, see. So I have a chronically sore knee here, so I can observe that. If I notice sensations in the body, I notice, there's a strong sensation in the knee here. So I look at that, and I keep observing that sensation. It seems to be permanent. It's always been there for the last 20 years. That's real me. That's my real self. Identify as having a sore knee. That's myself, you see. But if you bring in the reflection on impermanence and try to observe the arising and passing of this particular sensation, like right now, it doesn't exist. If I identify with me having a sore knee and it's not there, I've disappeared. I don't exist anymore, which is very peaceful, actually. But it'll probably come back tomorrow. When I can reflect upon it in terms of arising and passing, it's not so solid anymore. Yeah? Something which comes into existence and it passes away, and it comes and it goes. So if you're aware of it when it happens, but it's also, you can see it in the context of a rising and passing, impermanent, ephemeral process going on. It's not something fixed. So if it's something fixed, something up there all the time and permanent, then, that's me. Subject arises with the object. If there's no object there, subject doesn't arise. Or if the subject is very changeable, rising and passing, the subject is very changeable, right? Who are you? This is very subjective. It's being made up, being created, not tangible, not solid, not enduring. So, and the Buddha is pointing out this impermanence is one of the fundamental truths of reality. Everything is changing. Have you noticed that? I mean, we're all old enough to notice that, haven't we? We're changing. I was giving reflections about when I was here 50 years ago. Boy, have I changed. Not only have I changed, the whole place, I couldn't even recognize the place now. I get lost here now. I stayed here for 3 years, but I get lost here now. But mostly we just assume that things are permanent. It's sort of like the fallback. This is how it is. So when you refer to it, something being permanent, like an old habit, then it's energy efficient. But it's out of tune with reality. Reality has moved on now. It's usually referencing our past, our memory, you see, how it was then. So I come here and my UBC means this to me, my old memories. But I come here and shock. I don't know where I am now. So, fortunately, I don't suffer from it. I know things are changing all the time, so I don't suffer. But maybe somebody would. They come here and they get really lost and confused. And first of all, they don't they're in harmony with, they don't recognize that things change. So when they expect things to be a certain way and they're not. So frustration. Their expectations are not fulfilled. They suffer from that. And then they're confused. And they get frightened and suffer in all kinds of ways. But just all there is here is color and shape. Color and shape. Doesn't matter what form it takes. As long as they don't have any class to go to and don't have to get somewhere. Doesn't really matter. This requires, because we're always, the self is always looking for permanence, basically. The self looks for permanence, it looks for happiness, it looks for self. So that's the way it's programmed to respond to the environment, to reality. But the reality is, the Buddha realized, exactly the opposite. The reality is impermanent, everything is unsatisfactory, there's no permanent self anymore. Are you depressed? Had a good lunch, didn't you? But unfortunately, our self, at least our usual self, ordinary self, not the enlightened self, but the ordinary self, still looks for permanence, happiness, well-being, and self all the time. That's why the Buddha recommends that we reflect upon these themes: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, no permanent self. So, and reflecting means, in the Buddhist context of meditation, reflecting means, you can say thinking, but from a calm state of mind. So a different kind of thought. Contemplation, reflection. It's a matter of using this first level of meditation, samatha, or calm meditation, just at an appropriate degree. And then we bring in what we call insight meditation then. And there is various differences in how much calm you should have. You know, different teachers have different explanations, have different opinions even. When I was in Thailand, I had a chance to travel around Thailand and visit various meditation masters. That was one of my questions I asked them. How much calm do we need? And most of them were very, very advanced or very adept at meditation practice. So most of them said you need 4 levels of meditation. The 4th, absorption. So it wasn't, to me, I thought, oh, I'm hopeless then. My mind just can't get that calm, you know. But then I returned to Ajahn Chah, and I asked Ajahn Chah how much calm we need. And he said, just calm enough. And at first I was very confused because I like numbers. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, that level, 1, 2, 3, 4, just calm enough. It took me quite a few years to realize the wisdom of that, because each person is different. You know, calm is different for every person. Some people, for example, say maybe have a very nervous temperament, so they have to develop quite a bit of calm. You know, maybe for many years of just developing calm meditation and not developing insight meditation right away. For others, they're a bit more relaxed, their mind's a bit more generally calmer. They aren't a nervous temperament, and they don't need so much calm. And the most important part of it is calm enough for insight. And you know, this means that calm ideally does not end up as an end in itself. There are some people I've met people who are very, very skilled at calm meditation. There's some people who just have it naturally. I don't know why, but it's hard to say why they can have natural calmness of mind, but some are very gifted. But the problem is, if they are gifted, many of them kind of escape into it. It becomes an escape. They just sit down, and there was one woman who came to our monastery in Switzerland, and she was very good at at calm meditation. She'd try and come for all the full moon meditations, because she could sit there for 5 hours, just blissed out. I guess she was blissed out. She wasn't frowning anyway. Didn't feel any pain. But she was very good at it. Unfortunately, to me, she just escaped into it, because her life had so many problems, which she just never resolved in her life. So many problems. She used to sit there, and then she'd go home, and oh my gosh, all the problems, all the marriage problems, and children problems, and work problems, and everything else. And then she got a bit burned out. Using it like a fix, like I guess a drug addict uses drugs, and because she was really gifted at this, very hard to convince her it wasn't the right way to practice. Yeah. And it's not only her. I mean, there was the stories about the meditation masters in Thailand, some of the famous ones, and they were very good at concentration, and they just drop into it. Yeah, some of them could just sit down and went to very, very deep states of concentration. Fortunately, the great teachers, they met Ajahn, who was he was also grandfather of the forest tradition, you can say. They met him, and he had to teach them not to go into this deep concentration. They have to be able to come out of it to reflect and contemplate impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. One of them said that he did have faith in Ajahn, so he did follow his instructions. And he said that if he was a lay person, he would have killed Ajahn, because that bliss of concentration was so wonderful, and here Ajahn was not denying him that bliss. It's like it was just like such a tragedy that he couldn't just sit there and bliss out for hours and hours. Ajahn would get out of it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Here is suffering. Bam. State of mind is impermanent. But finally, they managed to get through that, and then they were, so-called, they became enlightened then because of that teaching and that reflection then. But it's not very common to us, you see. And to do contemplation in the correct way, it needs some degree of calmness of mind. So each person has to find out for themselves. Too much calm, nothing to contemplate. Mind is very, very calm. There's no impermanence. It just seems to last forever. No more unsatisfactoriness. It's just so blissful, and you forget about yourself anyway. So, no problem until you come out of it, and then sometimes the problems have doubled because, I had a chance being in the forest monastery in Thailand to be able to spend long hours in meditation. You see. But then one time I got very sick, and I just couldn't do it anymore because it is a conditioned state of mind. Hours and hours of walking, sitting, walking, sitting, walking, sitting. Anybody who does that for hours and hours, I think anybody, even me, can get a calm mind. But then I got sick, and I couldn't keep it up, and all these problems came back again. All the worries and doubts and all the confusion came back again. Because my first thought was, it's Buddhism's fault, not mine. This doesn't work. The Buddha's lying to us. But fortunately, I had a book on my desk. I was just flat on my back, laying in bed, hardly move. But my mind was spinning around, so I reached over to pick up this book, get some Buddhist teachings, and opened the page, and the first thing it said was, there's 3 stages of practice: morality, meditation, and wisdom. Wisdom, what's that? I'm missing something here, that's what. So there's morality, not an end in itself. Morality is a basis for concentration or focused attention, and focused attention is a basis for wisdom then. So I recognize I only did 2 steps, as it were. And then wisdom has various stages to it as well. As I mentioned, the 3 kinds of wisdom. Yeah. But the meditation wisdom, the meditation, comes from the contemplation of these themes. So the first one the Buddha gave, the most prominent one, was the contemplation of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. The second most common one the Buddha gave was called the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths. There is unsatisfactoriness, there is a cause, there is cessation, and there is the path. That's the second one. And there's a third one, which is very, very rarely used. It's observing the satisfaction, disagreement, disagreement of satisfactoriness, and then there is the escape. So it would recognize there is satisfaction, or gratification actually, not satisfaction, but gratification in sense impressions in the world, but there is also disappointment. All these sense gratifications will come to an end because they aren't permanent. Your senses will slowly begin to shut down. Your appreciation of the stimulation of sensual impressions will pass away eventually, and then sometimes they aren't there at all. So it's not very reliable to depend upon them. So they're changed, subject to change, so not very reliable. And then there is the escape. Escape is being able to let go of it, let go of our identification with these sense pleasures. But how it happens, sort of, you can say, automatically or practically, if we contemplate impermanence, how things arise and pass away. And the Buddha gave these three: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. I think it's easier for most people to look at impermanence. I mean, unsatisfactoriness is more like, it doesn't mean that everything is suffering or painful, but it means that it's incomplete, imperfect. There is gratification in the world. There is gratification, but it's not satisfying because eventually it'll change. You'll be disappointed. You put all your hopes in for example, people indulging their body, athletes, and they get a lot of satisfaction out of their body, but eventually the body breaks down, changes, gets old. So athletes finally they don't succeed anymore. It's because of impermanence, change. People lose their inspiration. They lose the enjoyment of things. Eventually, it's changeable, but it means that there is temporary gratification, certainly, and the Buddha did even, you can say, recognize the value of pleasure when he talked about meditation, for example, because the bliss or the pleasure one gets from a calm mind is actually otherworldly. So the Buddha said it's not a dangerous pleasure, if you like. So the bliss of meditation, is allowed, even encouraged. But this requires, first of all, the moderation. How much calm do we need? And then to remind ourselves, bring in the contemplation. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. No permanent self. The self is always changing, for example. It requires looking at it from a different perspective, rather than the conceptual perspective, from the experiential then, seeing it directly. Every time you look at the body, for example, is it the same body every time? How about your mind? Same thoughts every time? Okay, don't answer. But these contemplations, of course, they need to be developed and cultivated because it's not very common for us. It's not a natural act we do, not a way of looking at things normally. So, let's see now. Time for meditation then? Yeah. All comfort, you're all right sitting there now? Need a bit of stretch?